It's our purpose to bring to bear the principle of common sense and rational discussion to the issues of our day. America was created at a time of great turmoil, tremendous disagreements, anger, hatred. There was a book written in 1776 that guided much of the discipline of thinking that brought to us the discovery of our freedoms, of our God-given freedoms. It was Thomas Paine's Common Sense, written in 1776, one of the first American bestsellers, in which Thomas Paine explained by rational principles the reason why these small colonies felt the necessity to separate from the gigantic Kingdom of England and the King of England. He explained their inherent desire for liberty, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and he explained it in ways that were understandable to the people, to all the people, not just to the educated upper class. Because the desire for freedom is classless. The desire for freedom adheres in the human mind and in the human soul. Today we face another time of turmoil, of anger, and very, very serious partisan division. This is exactly the time we should consult our history. Look at what we've done best in the past and see if we can't use some of that to help us now. We understand that they created the greatest country in the history of the world, the greatest democracy, a country that has taken more people out of poverty than any other country on earth. They weren't perfect men and women, and neither are we. But a great deal of the reason for America's constant ability to self-improve is because we're able to reason, we're able to talk, we're able to analyze. We are able to apply our God-given common sense. So let's do it. Hi, this is Rudy Giuliani with Common Sense. And today, I have a good friend, great American, a great New Yorker, the American success story, big time, and somebody who is right at the key of our economy, who can tell us a few things about what's going to happen with the economy nationally and in New York, and tell us a lot about the conditions in New York. No one really follows it more or is more knowledgeable than my guest and friend, John Catsimatidis. John?
Well, thank you for having me. And our economy up to about 2 weeks ago was doing great. We have the lowest unemployment ever. We have the lowest unemployment in the black community, in the Hispanic community, the Latino community, in all communities. Mm-hmm. And I had an argument with a very good friend that's a Democrat yesterday at lunch, and he says to me, "But look at Trump's personality." I said, "Well, if we're going to talk about in November for personality, Trump loses. But if we talk about performance and doing a great job for our country, he wins."
Right.
And he understood what I said.
Right.
And look, President Trump is a tough guy. He grew up with the unions in the construction industry,
which you know well,
and you have to be tough.
You know that from your own experience.
You have to be tough to survive. And I said that I was on New York One a couple of weeks ago, the day after the debates, and they asked me, "What did you think of the debates last night?" I said, "Other than Bloomberg, who I have a lot of respect for."
Well, sure. Well, we both know him.
I said, "The other five," and I shouldn't have used these words, "the other five clowns, who would you trust? Whom would you trust to negotiate with the Red Chinese, the Koreans, the Iranians?" They have no courage, and they have no...
Yep.
I can't say those words on podcast.
Well, everyone should know that John has one of the most exciting shows that I am honored to very often be a guest on. And he has one on, it started as 1 day a week, now 2 days a week, right?
Yes.
And there'll be on Wednesday night, on Sunday night. If you just take a look.
Sunday mornings were the #1 show.
No, well, let's do this. So, John, just to give you a little background, I'm sure everyone knows him, but John came to the United States from Greece. He's exactly what you would call, in capital letters, a self-made man. He's an example of what you can do in America. And one of his businesses is the supermarket business, which gives him a really good sense of what's going on. And he's also involved in the oil business. So I'm going to ask him, so what's happening in the supermarkets right now as a result of the virus?
We have our ears to the ground, and usually we pick up business because there's snowstorms. Well, we didn't have any snowstorms this year, but it seems like we're picking up a lot of business. The restaurants are not, people are not going to restaurants as much. They're buying their meats, their steak, chicken, and cooking it at home. They wiped out our water supply in the stores. We're getting more in. They wiped out all our cleaning supplies.
When you say in our stores, roughly how many stores are we talking about, John?
We have 35 Aristides and D'Agostino stores.
Okay, so these are big stores.
Yes.
Right.
And we supply a lot of the needs of our city. And we've done this for 50 years.
I know you have, John. It's really remarkable. So what I guess you detect is that people are preparing for maybe a quarantine, or they may have to be, like a snowstorm, they may be in their apartment for 4 or 5 days. Or
like a snowstorm, it may be in an apartment for a few days. I am hoping, like our discussion was, that it'll blow itself over in the next couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But meanwhile, there's concern.
Yeah.
People are concerned. I think the mayor said before that if it's a crowded subway train, don't go in it. So what does that mean? And
well, as usual, useless advice.
Yes, yes.
So the thing I've noticed about this, John, because I dealt with West Nile virus, and it had never been experienced in the U.S. before, so we had to really make it up. And then I dealt with, as you know, 9/11, and then anthrax a month later, and I was present on television 3 times a day, giving people advice. I did it to give them advice, and I did it to calm them down, so they knew no matter how bad it was, if the mayor could say it. And then I always reminded myself, even during 9/11, always end a press conference on a positive note. Now, Cuomo has taken over.
Yes.
I see Cuomo on television much more than the mayor. He seems to be the leader in this crisis, whereas in prior years, Koch, me, the mayor, he's got the big medical department that knows what to do.
It looks like Governor Cuomo has taken over, and he's put the National Guard in charge of one of our upstate communities, where he surrounded it, and I think containment is good. So far, I think our country has been very lucky. We have, overall, for 350 million people, we have very little problems. But I think we wait it out and see what happens.
And how do you think the administration is in Washington? I mean, we've had examples like 9/11, where the administration worked hand in glove with all of us. And then we had Katrina, other situations. We had Obama waiting 21 days to deal with SARS. How do you see the administration?
Donald Trump is a crisis manager. He knows how to deal with crisis. He knows how to handle it, and I think he's done a great job. I don't think anybody could have done better.
Yeah, I mean, look, I kind of did crisis management for a living, and I even teach it. And I can't find, and including being way out in front and closing significant numbers of people. I mean, a lot of doctors tell me this could be 3 times worse if he didn't close down. And everybody criticized him for doing it. Even his own people were against it.
If he didn't close down the certain airports where people were coming in from China, from South Korea, the problem would have been much worse. And He handled it right. There's nobody else who could have handled it better.
John, what's going on in the oil? I mean, I think people are confused. The other day there was a big drop in the market, and all the talking heads were debating: is it from coronavirus or is it from the adjustment of the price of oil?
It's politics. Mr. Putin decided to have a fight with the Saudis, and the Saudis don't want to back down, and Mr. Putin doesn't want to back down, so they're, pardon my language, they're pissing at each other, and the people that are gaining on it is the consumer. The price of gas is coming down, but
all the way down.
For the overall market, it's not good, and I'm sure it's going to sort itself out over the next couple of weeks.
Well, right now we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back, and I think all of you want to hear John's advice and information on the condition of the city. Very few people know it as well as John Catsimatidis. For those of you who know me, in addition to law and politics, I'm passionate about the Yankees, baseball, football, all sports to watch, golf to play, history to read, opera, classical music to listen to and watch, and cigars to relax and socialize. And I have definite opinions on the best cigars for the right time and the right place. And you'll hear about that too. But the revolution in cigars took place in the 1990s. Most cigars then were machine-made with foreign ingredients. Now it's just the opposite. Most are hecho a mano, man-made, all organic, natural, and premium. The revolution was led by one man and one man alone, Marvin Shankin, and Cigar Aficionado magazine. Marvin had been rating wines quite successfully for Wine Spectator magazine, and he brought the rating system to cigars. The first cigars rated in the 90s were gone in a flash. Even now, the first thing I do when I get my magazine is I go right to the ratings page. There it is. 93, 91. Oh yeah, I'll go for that one. Then there'll be 94. 92. Problem is you got to get there fast, because they go fast. This revolutionized the cigar industry. If you like wine, if you like scotch, if you like bourbon, if you like rye, if you like vodka, if you like gin, they're the magazines for you. And you know what? Subscribe to Cigar Aficionado right now through the link on our website. Welcome back to the interview with John Catsimatidis. John, I'm going to play a little game with the two of us. So in 1994, after I was elected mayor in 1993, the Republican Party actually went out and did a poll and did a profile of who should run for governor against Andrew's father. And they came up with certain characteristics. He should be from downstate, should be not rigidly pro-life, somewhere in the middle. He should be certain age. And they picked George Pataki. That ended up with George Pataki, who fit most of the characteristics. So if you were going to do that for a mayor, I mean, I don't think we're giving away very much when we both say, as every New Yorker says, that this mayor has been a horrendous failure. I can't find anybody who disagrees with that.
I know him for 25 years, and I'm very disappointed.
In de Blasio.
In de Blasio, and because he is smarter than that, and somehow I think he's going out and trying to make the progressives happy. The progressive socialists, you know what I call a socialist? It's a communist without a gun. Mm-hmm. I talked to many of moderate Democrats, and I said, why are you letting the so-called socialist progressives take over your party?
Well, they're all over the country.
And I'm very upset about that, and I've told them so. I've told that to Senator Schumer. I've told that to de Blasio. I've told them all.
And what's the impact? What do they say?
I think, and I told Hasty that too, which, we have the worst crime increase in 20 years, maybe 30. They're afraid of the socialists. They're afraid that the socialists are going to come in and kick out their position of leadership.
So I think AOC would be an example in New York, right?
Yes.
And they have them around the country.
And I say that they should have a little more courage than that.
Of course. So I'll get back to the profile in a minute, but it leads to the question, do you see her as a possible candidate for mayor? AOC?
I think she, until somebody knocks her down, I think the moon is her is her object. I mean,
so you think she could?
She could go for anything. But as far as the profile
of the next mayor, what
should be,
and let's think about it. Who could get elected and who could straighten out a lot of the deterioration that's happened.
When I ran as a Republican liberal.
Which is the way I ran, by the way.
Yes. We both ran the same way, and I'm a Republican as far as common sense, as far as keeping our streets safe, balancing our budgets, and not going crazy on the numbers. I'm a liberal as far as, I helped run PAL for 34 years.
And thank you for doing that. Well, we'll explain what that is in a minute.
It's a great...
You're darn right, it's great.
And we help the kids of the inner city, the Hispanics, the African Americans, all the inner city kids. And as far as being a liberal, yes, I'm a liberal because I want to help those kids. Those kids need help. And I remember many a times we have the annual party with the kids,
yes,
Christmas party or a holiday party.
It's wonderful.
And I stand there with Ray Kelly sometimes, and I said, Ray, how many of those kids can we help? And we can't help 100%, but certainly we could help 20%, 25%. My goal is 100% someday, but let's help as many as we can. And I think that's very important. So liberal, yes. Republican, as far as keeping our streets safe, yes. I think all of the above. I mean, as the people that are progressive socialists, no. I mean, what they're doing right now with the laws they did in Albany, and they were afraid not to pass it because they were afraid of losing their position.
So these are laws like letting people out on bail or not having bail for people who have now gone out and committed horrendous crimes.
They took all the criminals
it's
that were pending bail and took away the judge's right to an opinion and threw those criminals into the street.
John, I had to change that when I first came into office. Remember they used to call it turnstile justice?
Yes.
It meant you got arrested, so you'd have all these drug dealers on the street. Police would come in, they'd arrest the drug dealers. Drug dealers would be back in 2 hours. And you know what everybody on the street thought? They thought they were paying off the police.
Yeah.
But it was actually the system that was corrupt.
And then what's worse, Mayor de Blasio is closing down Rikers and taking down all the criminals from Rikers, throwing them in the streets. So you got the bail reform throwing them in the streets. You got Rikers Island throwing them in the streets. We got the street. The criminals are in charge of the streets.
And this is a city, and obviously I was part of it, but excuse if I sound a little bit proud of this.
We had the safest city in the world.
I took over the city. We were doing around 2,000 murders a year. We were doing 12,000 felonies a week, and people were moving out like crazy. And I turned it around with Bill Bratton, and then Howard Safer, and then Bernie Kerik. We were able to withstand 9/11 without that crime returning, and our economy was able to bounce right back. And then I had a successor who, although obviously he was running on the Democratic side, I have some disagreements with, but fundamentally he was a good mayor. He was a good executive. He was a businessman who didn't really know much about politics. It took him a little while to adjust, Now, so I think if I could summarize your profile is somebody who is conservative, Republican, whatever, in the area of fiscal responsibility, law and order, keeping people safe, whereas the Democrats seem to have forgotten that, but has a social conscience.
Yes.
And I should tell you something about John Catsimatidis that he's not going to say. Everything he just said about children and helping them, and that's not just words in John's case. John has done all this. I don't think there are many New Yorkers, if any, that would disagree that this man may have the biggest heart in New York and is the most philanthropic. Or at least there's nobody that I can think of more than John. And that comes from the experience of being a mayor. You were a Democrat then, and you still helped me.
I was a Bill Clinton Democrat.
You were a Bill Clinton Democrat, and I was
a different Democrat.
And I was a Reagan Republican. Yeah. But you helped me as much as and more than a lot of Republicans.
Yes, yes.
Because you put the city first.
Yes.
Well, that's a great credit to you.
The greatest city in the world, and you helped make it the greatest city in the world. Now we have to keep it the greatest city in the world.
Yeah, and look, like you, a long time ago I was a Democrat, then I became an independent, Republican. I love the Republican Party, but it's not all about the Republican Party. It's a vehicle to getting to help people, and you see it that way.
Yes.
So now, John, I didn't tell you this before I asked you to come here, but the doors are locked, there are guards there, and you're not getting out of here until you announce for mayor. Because when you did that profile, there's one person that comes to mind, and it's John Catsimatidis. And I know it would be a big burden on you, but you got to think about it. Promise me, I'll open the doors if you tell me you think.
I promise we're going to think. We are seriously considering it.
Good. Oh, boy, that makes me feel
anybody
good.
that runs, you need to have backing. You need to have money.
But you've got...
Because normal people, for some reason, don't get backing.
And I think running before, I lost the first time. First
Yes.
time I ran, I lost by 2% to Dinkins. I'm now glad that I did. I think I would have been not as good a mayor the first time.
You learned a lot.
Second. I learned, I think I learned more than I learned in college.
Yeah.
in that 4-year period. I know you have. I mean, you've become, just in talking to you, you've become a real expert on the city now. So even though it would have been...
Greatest city in the world.
It would have been great if you had won then and we'd have not had the episode of this character. But you're going to be much better for all the experience you've now had.
Well, my mistake, I ran as a Republican liberal, and when I lost the Republican primary, maybe I should have stayed in with the Liberal Party. You never know what would happen in a three-way race.
Lindsay won that way.
Yeah.
The second time. And then he went ahead and he quit the Republican Party, which is the dumbest thing he ever did.
Yeah.
Because I think Nixon would have picked him as vice president instead of Nelson Rockefeller. But that's just my own. That's my own. We'll talk about that sometime. I think it was one of the biggest mistakes that John Lindsay made. And I got to know John. Nobody took care of John. John got defeated. Ed Koch hated him. Dinkins, even though he supported Dinkins over me, nobody had ever invited him back to Gracie Mansion. I was the first one to invite him back. I got to know him. Then he had some financial problems at the end, and Peter Vallone, who's a very good man, by the way. Peter was the Speaker of the City Council.
Very decent.
He's our kind of guy.
Yeah.
And Peter and I created a job for him so he could have some health insurance. He ended in pretty tough condition, really tough condition. So tell me how now that we've done the city and we got the answer to the city. John has always been deeply involved in foreign policy, the country. Where do you see the country going right now and this election?
I think right now, President Trump is the only one tough enough to stand up for the American people and do the right thing for all the American people. I'm concerned about Biden. I'm concerned about Bernie. None of us know what's going to happen at the convention. Mm-hmm. There could be some surprises. Who knows?
Hillary? Again?
She
It could be like those movies where the hand keeps coming up. You get there, you knock it down, and the hand comes up again.
She wants it, but it'd be tough.
Now you know Hillary, and I know Hillary.
Yes.
I think the ambition is, it's going to be there forever.
Yeah.
I think she began with that ambition, and she's
Well,
sitting there. She's
if it
sitting there.
doesn't happen
She's
this
sitting
time-
there thinking about it.
She's thinking about it. If it doesn't happen this time, it's not going to happen.
Right. That'd be an interesting race, a rerun.
Of Trump and...
So you know President Trump. The day after he was elected, I walked into his office and I said, Mr. President-elect. And he looked at me and he said, you too? I've known you 25 years. You always call me Donald. I want to be Donald. I said, no. I'm going to call you Mr. President-elect and Mr. President every time I see you, because that'll remind you of the responsibilities that you have. And it'll remind me of who you are, because you're different now. So I worked for him hard because I thought he'd be much better than Hillary. And personally, I was indebted to him because he was so good to my son. I felt a personal debt to him. And I've seen a part of him that most people don't get to see in the way he helped my son when I was having marriage problems. And my son now works for him, and he's probably his most dedicated worker. And I thought he'd be a good president against all those people who said no. But I got to tell you the truth, John. I didn't think he'd be this good. I didn't think I'd ever see a president that I would compare to Ronald Reagan.
If things keep going well, he could be better than Ronald Reagan.
What, do you feel the same way I did?
Yes.
I know you do. You knew he'd be good because we knew him, but did you ever think he'd be like one of the top 3 or 4 or 5?
He may be better than Ronald Reagan. Let's see what happens. I hope he keeps going.
And here's what I don't understand. And since you've been a Democrat, independent, Republican like me.
Same as you.
Right. You can say this. So if he's going to be a great president, it helps everybody. It helps the Democrats. So they'll get their chance after him. We're gonna have a Democrat president in the next, it just happens that way.
I'm very, very surprised in the way Nancy Pelosi is handling things. I'm very surprised the way Senator Schumer is handling things. Because if they use plain old common sense, instead of trying to knock down the president, they should work together with him.
Well, and again, you and I know Chuck for forever and ever. What about that threat, the threat on the Supreme Court? Why have they gotten so angry, John? The anger is ridiculous.
The anger is there, and that's what it is. It's anger. And I'm not sure it's ever going to go away.
So if you did run, so this is a hypothetical, if you did run, you may be running against AOC.
You never know, but I won't back down. I'm going to tell her. I will buy her a one-way ticket to Venezuela.
Well, that's what she
See
wants,
how Venezuela turned out.
She might go north. Her knowledge of history and geography is a little like she didn't know there was a second. She didn't know there was a Second Amendment. She didn't know that we have a succession plan for the president. I mean, this is like not a particularly well-schooled. And then she's got ideas that are totally crazy. We go bankrupt.
Yeah.
And they, how did she? Now I agree with you. Nancy Pelosi is another one that I disagree with politically, but I've always thought she was a superb politician and tough as nails.
I always liked her.
Tough as nails.
As a person.
Now, how does AOC go? 10 rounds with her and win 9 of the 10, if not all 10.
She allowed her to get away with it instead of putting her down.
Why? She's at the end of her career. So what? Were they going to throw her out? So they throw her out. She'd go down in glory if they throw her out, predicting the future of her party as opposed to, watching it get trashed like this. So what is it? Is it the desire for power and holding on to it?
We talked to Hasty in Albany with what's going on with the bail reform and throwing the criminals onto the streets. And he was actually scared that the AOC people would go after him and he would lose the speakership of the New York State Assembly. And you can't run the ship with no courage. What we used to say in the old days, no balls.
But John, so this is why John and I did the profile thing. We need a lot of candidates that have independence. In other words, they know what their party wants, they know what the other party wants, and then they think about what's the best thing for my city. And you have the capacity to do that. I do not understand why some of the older politicians who grew up like we did, Pelosi, Schumer, how do they lose this? And letting the kids who don't even know American history.
Very disappointed in it. Very disappointed in them.
I mean, Schumer's a very smart man.
Yes.
And he's doing things like threatening the Supreme Court to make him. And people tell me that Chuck is worried she may run against him in the primary.
Wow.
How crazy is that?
Well, I mean...
somebody can always run against you.
It's a crazy world. And we have to put an end to the craziness. So, Mr. Mayor, I think we should put our foot down in 2020 and say, let's run more people with courage to do the right thing by the American people.
Well, you've emphasized that a lot, John. That's a real theme, and I think it's an important one. So I want to ask you just a few more questions about the projects that you love.
Sure.
Tell people what the PAL is, because I grew up with the PAL as a little boy in Brooklyn.
Mr. Morgenthau interviewed me for the job in 1984. I remember having breakfast with him with Stevie Kaufman, and I guess I passed the interview, and I went to work for PAL, helping
Police Athletic League.
Police Athletic League, helping the kids of the inner city, and I'm dedicated to it, and I want to continue to help the kids of the inner city. Mr. Morgenthau, unfortunately, passed away about 6 months ago, 10 days short of his 100th birthday.
Amazing life.
Yes. And he dedicated his entire life to helping the kids in the inner city. And
John, I didn't think anybody could replace him.
Well,
except right away, you were right there. You didn't even let a day go by. And you kept the thing just as...
We're trying to
You're not just trying, you're doing... You've reinvigorated it.
Yes.
And it's so important. Basically, the PAL engages the police and other people in the community to work with the kids, to play basketball, to do mentoring, to whatever, things that they can have a common interest in. And just think how good that is, particularly with the whole police community relationships. It creates a whole different way of looking at things. So John, two other things. Coney Island. What are you doing to my favorite place in New York, Coney Island? The great steeplechase.
I live in a beach house in Long Island, and I was offered this property in Coney Island near on Surf.
Oh, yeah.
And I went there. The mistake I made, I went there and the sun was shining and it was a beautiful day, and I fell in love. And we built two beautiful buildings on the beach. And the thing I use is when people move in to Coney Island, every apartment has a view of the beach. And you know what I say to them? I'll certify. I'll give you a guarantee that you breathe in that ocean air, you're going to live 10 years longer.
So John, when I was a little boy in Brooklyn, my grandmother, who my father's mother, every year, 2 days, she'd pick out 2 days, she would take all of her grandchildren to Coney Island and leave the parent, all her sons and daughters home, and all my cousins and I would go to Coney Island. A couple of times we got lost. My grandmother used to love to go to the Turkish baths. Remember the Turkish baths?
Yes.
I imagine they are not
I don't think
sanitary
they're there
now.
anymore.
No, I don't think they think they went away with AIDS. And then she would twice, she'd go in the ocean and take us all in the ocean. With her. I have these memories of Steeplechase Park, where you got a ticket, you go on all the rides. And when I was mayor, I did what I could to bring it back. I put the Met Stadium there.
It was a great thing that you put the Met Stadium there.
And for
the Met Stadium, the aquarium is there now.
For a Yankee fan to put the Met Stadium there, this took. I had to work with my conscience to do that.
I grew up with the Yankees.
I know you do.
Yeah.
Well, I see you there all the time.
Yeah.
But the Mets are part of the city too, And they've got a beautiful statue, I should tell people. They have a beautiful statue of Jackie Robinson and Pee Wee Reese, with Pee Wee Reese with his arm around Jackie Robinson, which is, if you've ever watched the movie 42, that's the thing that finally overcame a lot of the worst prejudice, when this Southern guy hugged the black guy and said, he's part of our team.
Wow.
It's a great one. So you're working on something beautiful there.
Part of our culture.
And our history.
Part of our history, part of our evolution.
Mm-hmm. Last thing, ABC. John, in addition to supermarkets, oil, leading candidate for mayor, philanthropist of the city, running PAL, and who knows how many other things you do. You're now running one of the great radio stations.
I grew up with WABC. I remember Cousin Brucey. I remember Harold Harrison. And I think it was one of the greatest stations around.
Cousin Brucey
it's 50,
was a great disc jockey.
Yes. 50,000 watts clear channel.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
That is one of the most powerful radio stations in the Northeast. And I am proud to own it and to help make it #1 again and help our advertisers and get some additional talent on. And maybe we'll bring Cousin Brucey back to do some songs.
Oh, could you? I'll be on with him. I love him. You know, I do a charity thing with Cousin Brucey every year. He's also a very, very big-hearted man. I mean, a lot of young people would not know who he was, but he was really the main disc jockey for us when we were growing up. And the Elvis Presley era, the Beatles era.
We grew up with him.
He was probably the most famous disc jockey even in America. I mean, he's in a lot of movies, playing a disc jockey. Well, John, I'm so glad that it's in your hands because it's another New York treasure. WABC is another New York treasure.
I'm here to preserve it and make it even better.
Well, I think everyone really treasures you, John, and also let me mention his beautiful family, which John and his church. John takes care of his wonderful family, all of whom are big contributors to us, and you've been a real stalwart of the Greek Orthodox Church.
Mr. Mayor, thank you so much.
Well, I've appreciated it, and you know how admiration I have for you, John.
Thank you.
And if you need any help, so let me just make it clear, I endorsed John Catsimatidis
Thank you.
for mayor, and I am going to let him out of here against my will without him announcing, but I think we moved him along a little.
Certainly have. Thank you very much.
Let's do this. Let's give him a good example.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.